My guest this morning, first guest, is Mal Fletcher, who's chairman of 2020 Plus. It's a think tank on social affairs. And good morning to you, Mal.
Good morning, Larry.
I mean, this is a real 21st century problem, is it not? I mean, this gradual encroachment of CCTV facilities is something, you know, is relatively recent. And has the law been quick to regulate it and regulate it enough, do you feel?
Well, it is a new phenomenon, Larry, a new question. I mean, it's become, as you said earlier, a very attractive security measure for homeowners, simply because it can be driven by a home computer or even a mobile app now.
Yep.
But I think even in the civic arena, CCTV needs to be watched very carefully, because it's an example of what I call technology creep, and this could happen in a domestic sense as well. That's where new technologies are used in ways that were never declared when they were first installed. So we were sold, if you like, CCTV some years ago on the basis that it would bring crime down, and in some instances it has, but not in all. Now, though, we're seeing it used in parts of London to track parents who double park outside schools for a few seconds while they pick up their kids. So private CCTV could easily do the same thing and overstep the ethical boundaries by, as you suggest, pointing through neighbours' windows or something. And so it needs to be regulated both domestically and, I think, even in the civic space.
And, I mean, is it possible that this could be simplified so that there was just an absolute delineation mark about, you know, how far any of your equipment can intrude onto your neighbour's territory, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, there are grey areas with all of these things, aren't there? Because so much of our space does overlap. But the big question is centrally an ethical one. Where's the balance between private security and civic responsibility? I may be entitled to photograph the area immediately around my front door, for example, but I shouldn't probably be pointing the camera in such a way that it takes in private space next door, and I shouldn't be allowed to point it at the street, which is a public space, and impinging on either of those is an intrusion. And I think that's exacerbated too with this technology, because we can record what is seen, which gives us a permanent record of what people are doing. And of course, criminals can hack into a digital system to track movements of people in my neighbourhood, which I think they'd find very helpful when it comes to scoping the area for crimes.
So you could, in fact, via a computer, actually be watching somebody when they're leaving the house and know when there's, you know, effectively there's nobody there.
Absolutely, and we've seen in recent times, you know, we had the big debate about how far GCHQ could go in basically accessing our phone calls and digital communications. And so, you know, criminals can hack into any digital system if they know how to do it, which means that my camera, which I'm using for perfectly legal purposes, may be, you know, used by someone that's not using it in such a legal way.
But you're more concerned about the general creep, as it were, in terms of public CCTV facilities.
Yes, I am, and I don't. It's not that I believe we should wind back the clock and not have these cameras, but we already have the highest incidence of CCTV per capita for any city in Europe, here in London. So it's a concern that people begin to feel, if we're not careful, that they're being watched as suspects rather than protected as citizens. And if trust breaks down between the authorities and the public, it's very difficult to rebuild. And trust is what glues our system together. We can't afford to pursue personal security in a way that destroys the social currency of trust that really does hold us together in a very complex age.
I mean, if you had somebody, you know, if your neighbour, for example, decided they wanted their home protected by this, and you did live in close proximity, how do you think you would deal with it? I mean, I've been reading about situations where people are just becoming very confrontational about it and basically saying, look, you know, this is what I'm doing, and you've got to put up with it.
Well, I think that the first step, obviously, is to try to have a peaceful and meaningful discussion with that individual. That's not always easy if they've got their heart set on something and you're not so sure about it. If it can't be resolved on a personal level, and you can't have proof that it's been addressed, then you may need to take it to some sort of higher authority. And this may be where the government needs to set up some sort of reference body or bodies locally that people can take these issues to. And let's not forget too, Larry, we've now got the growing incidence of the number of drones that are being used in civil society and in private society. In the US, they're expecting 30,000 drones to be in the skies over America within the next 6 years. And they're going to integrate drone laws into existing aviation regulations. So there's another opportunity for people to feel like, you know, big data is morphing into either Big Brother with the government or even into intrusive data-hungry corporations. So we just need to be careful this issue of trust isn't compromised too far.
Yeah, and thank you very much for joining us here. That was Mal Fletcher, who's chairman of 2020 Plus, a think tank on social affairs, and we're having a conversation about this whole invasion, as it were, of CCTV systems.